the question has been raised. I'm trying to now respond or refer to things which have been said in the last last couple of days, without actually being able to take on directly the arguments which have been made. This is a kind that I've been describing, a kind of thinking under erasure. What I mean by that is simply that there are no, in intellectual thought, there are really absolutely new paradigms of thought which nobody has ever attended to before. But we do live in a period when many of the existing paradigms established and developed within traditional intellectual disciplines either no longer in themselves adequately correspond to the problems that we have to resolve, or require supplementing from other disciplines with which they have not, as it were, historically been directly connected. This is the opening of what is called the trans-disciplinary field of inquiry. And I speak about it because I have once again, somewhat unconsciously, always found myself in a transdisciplinary field. I've never been able to be satisfied with working from within a single discipline. That is why that does not have nothing to do with not respecting, what has gone on in the work of developing intellectual disciplines. But I'm at the same time aware of the fact that the organization of modern knowledge into the disciplinary framework occurred at a specific historical moment, and that its historical moment may have passed, or may be passing, or may be waning, or that particular way of organizing knowledge may no longer be adequate to the reality it is trying to analyze and describe. I feel, whether right or wrong, a disjuncture between the disciplines on the one hand and the rapidly shifting and changing fragments of reality which one is trying to describe. Again, I'm not recommending to you an antidisciplinary pathway. I'm simply saying that I have not found it possible to do so, to think simply within the given disciplines. Now, that has had, profound costs for my own thought. First of all, it means I really am not an academic in the traditional sense at all. I mean, Barry was, very kind, and people are very kind, to refer to me as a scholar, but I'm not a scholar. It's not what I am. It really isn't. I've lived in academic life and earned my living, not terribly well, from doing academic work. I love to teach. I wanted to teach from the earliest point that I can remember. And teaching goes on in academic worlds. I respect and defend the academy to the hilt, the capacity to pursue knowledge for its own sake, the arena and site of critical thought. One has to defend that, especially these days when it is under such attack from so many quarters with one's life. But it doesn't mean that I want to be or think of myself as having been an academic. I would claim, I would insist on my right to the title of having done intellectual work. I am an intellectual. In that sense, I'm an intellectual because I believe in the power and necessity of ideas. I don't mean by that I think my task is to produce theory. I would do without theory if I could. The problem is I can't. You can't, because the world presents itself in a chaos of appearances. And the only way in which one can, as it were, understand, break down, analyze, grasp, in order to do something about the present conjuncture that confronts one, is to break into that series of congealed and opaque appearances with the only tools you have: concepts, ideas, thoughts. To break into it and to come back to the surface of a situation or conjunction one is trying to explain, but having made the detour through theory. The detour through theory. Marx, in his 1857 introduction, which is a wonderful methodological text about which I've written, as Larry Grossberg remarked the other day, a piece, describes exactly this process. I'm talking about a working method of Marx. I'm not talking about, whether one subscribes to all the theories of Marxism or not. This is a different question. And what Marx says is, you begin with an obvious fact. There are people around, the category of population. Okay? How far can you take the category of population? Well, you can take it quite far. But really, at the moment when you decide that every population is always divided, it's not a homogeneous or multifarious single object. Always within that population are, as he says, capitalists and labor, men and women, slaves and masters. That the social categories into which people are inserted is probably more important than the sum of the humanity that they constitute. And to make the move of thinking, of analyzing the population, as it were, into its particular categories, seems an abstract moment. What does that do? Well, what Marx says you need to do then is not to rest there, which a great deal of theory does. It's pleased to produce the categories, and it proceeds to refine the categories. And Marx says, far from it. You return then to the problem you're already wanting to solve, but now understanding that it is the product of many determinations, not of one. Not of a singular logic unfolding through history, not of a teleology which has its own end, not of the fantasy of Hegel's, resolution of reason and of the real and the rational, which is some moment when thought and the real will be identical the same. None of that, but to a world of many determinations. Many determinations.